This is going to be part one of a three-part video. This is the first one here is going to be on cryptocurrency, second on gold, and the third on silver. But I'll just quickly cover a little bit on gold and silver because I can't really make this video without stating these sort of facts and figures at the beginning. So if I was we've got these figures that keep popping up all the time, and people who just want to dominate planet Earth. They will always be there. It's an archetype. It's human behavior. Everybody wants to rule the world. Well, not everybody, but there are certain types, certain archetypes that pop up, and they want to rule the entire world. And the best way to do that is to control people's means of survival, whether that be food, water, warmth, shelter, mediums of exchange, and things like that. So that this is what they go for, and cryptocurrency is dominating the news at the moment. It seems to be very energetically charged. As soon as you mention cryptocurrency, you get people come out of the woodwork who would never normally have any opinions, suddenly becoming quite aggressive at times, for both cases, for and against. Myself, I'm in the middle. I always like to be in the middle. Now, my case for my reasons for doing this video on cryptocurrency is to try and show a different point of view. People always say that I've always got a different point of view and opinion that they've never thought of before. So, and a few of the things I'm going to share in this video I've never heard anywhere. So, they just common sense to me. That's where it's all going, and that's that. So, if we look at gold and silver, just to cover a bit on that, there's been a purposeful destruction of gold, physical gold and physical silver. That's been going on since the early 19th century, I would say. But certainly, it's been faded out over time. Its importance has been removed from people's consciousness, to the point now where you actually get people turn around and say, gold and silver is just a relic. It's just, it's nothing anymore. It has no value. It's meaningless. Of course, banks and very powerful people are still buying it up by the truckload daily, and have been doing so for a long time. Now, one of the important things to remember about the destruction of gold and silver is that in the early 1930s here in the UK, they stopped making coins. So first of all, they want to own it by, all right, we can't own gold. Like, we can't, how can we stop people from exchanging gold? Well, we can print, stamp our faces or press our faces onto the front of the coin and use that. That's the only currency that we'll accept, is the one with our Queen or King's face on, say, for instance, using the UK as an example. Now, what happens then is it's the same with silver, is that they print their faces on it and they only accept that. And gradually get into people's consciousness, so that people end up thinking, well, this is the universal currency now, and we can't do it any other way. Now, all of a sudden, we find ourselves in a position in the early 30s where they stopped making silver coins out of silver. It wasn't pure silver anymore. They started adding other alloys and things, to the point now where there's no gold or silver coins in what I would call circulation, as in what we're using as mediums of exchange. Whilst there is still coins like the sovereign, which is recognised as a currency here in the UK, and guaranteed for £100, even though it's worth over double that, for instance. So that's covering gold and silver. The one last thing I'd like to say about gold is that we were removed. That gold was removed as a backing for fiat currency in the early 70s. So after that, really, it pretty much was print what you like, in money-wise. So the destruction of the fiat currencies, any fiat currencies that removed the gold standard in the early 70s, their destruction began. They started to become worthless at that point. So an important way to view to view what I'm saying here as well in terms of fiat currencies, because it really relates to cryptocurrencies at the moment, especially if you wanted to buy cryptocurrencies. You know, you would have to start off with a form of fiat currency. It's still the case today, even though you can go by other means now. Now, when you're using your fiat currency, an important question to ask yourself, like, people say, well, money is not sort of worthless, it's not becoming worthless, it's very powerful, it's grown, you know. My house value, for the user house values as an example. So here in the UK, this house I'm sat in was purchased by my nan and granddad in the early 80s for about £7,000, I think it was. Today's price, as it is in the sort of state it's in today, which is not great, but it's far from perfect. But you know, it's okay. It is about £190,000. Now, people will say, well, what a great investment, you know, that your house has gone up in value so much. And I say, well, there's two ways of looking at things, and people always like to hear my point of view on things, because I always come up with something different they never thought of. And one of my famous sayings is, everything's the opposite of what you think. So, you know, fiat currencies, for instance, would be a perfect example of that. I mean, everybody thinks it's valuable, and it's valueless. Ultimately, it exists in human consciousness as a lot of things. But one of the most important things to remember is that, you know, if everything's the opposite of what we think, and I keep saying this, then how do I overcome the problem of, like, say, people say, oh, my house is worth so much money? I would say that your house hasn't gone up in value. I would say that the currency has gone down in value. So the fact that your house is worth so much more than it was a decade or two ago wouldn't be because the house is actually worth more, is that the money is worth less. A prime example of that would be Hitler's Germany. You know, when you had to walk down to the local bread shop to buy a loaf of bread, and you would take a whole sack full of money. It was worthless. People were exchanging sackfuls of money with each other just to buy loaves of bread. Now, did the loaf of bread go up in value, or did the currency go down in value? That would be an extreme case to point out that the currencies are being destroyed at the moment, that they're becoming worthless. So obviously that leads to its traumatic experiences for people. And when they find out that their money's become worthless and they've been tricked all these years, and it's almost been purposefully created and printed and controlled by higher means and everything else, you know, that's quite a hard thing to accept, especially when you've been caught with your pants down, so to speak. So going on to a cryptocurrency, now, it's always been, go back to the control of the money. So basically we've gone from gold and silver and just exchanging lumps of gold and silver into what we have today, which is gold and silver is virtually worthless. It's not a medium of exchange anymore, and now we have something that exists on a computer microchip that has every single characteristic of gold. So it's limited, it's mined, it's, you know, basically it's not every single characteristic of gold, but it's got almost every single characteristic of gold without being actual physical gold. So if I wanted to control the way that people spend and what they do, then I would certainly go down the cryptocurrency route, because it exists on a microchip, and ultimately, and this is where people are saying in their heads now, rubbish, it's decentralized, it's this, it's that. Yeah, okay, I'm getting to that in a minute, and how controlled it actually is. All right. So it's not as free as you think it is. And there's one thing that everybody's forgetting. The cryptocurrency is decentralized, and it is mined and everything else, and it's purposefully, you know, created by very clever people, and people have made lots of money out of it, and fair play to them. You know, this is one thing that, remember, I'm not slating anybody who's made money out of cryptocurrency. I'd say you know, in a way you're cleverer than me. I wrote posts on Facebook which can be seen back in 2013, 14, I think, 2014, where I stated that I want to buy all in on Bitcoin, for instance. Didn't do it, my mistake. Stupid, I could have been retired now. But that's besides the point. You know, I'm just stating the fact that people make money. I've got no problem with that. No problem. Multimillionaires, I'm no victim. So, you know. Now, the next important thing to remember is that cryptocurrencies come along. In order to buy people into the consciousness of cryptocurrencies, you need to make millionaires. It's what we would call in the business world, we would call it a loss leader. So something has to come along to excite the people, to gain the consciousness. And if you're thinking on an individual scale, then you would, for instance, give someone something for such a little cost. A drug dealer would be a perfect example of that. A loss leader would be a drug dealer giving someone free cocaine, and then they find out that they're addicted to it, and it's got into their consciousness, and now they've made loads, you know, thousands of times their profit off of that one person. A bigger example of that would be big business. So the big business would come along, and it would, or governments, for instance, now know that their time is done in terms of fiat currency. They knew that when they took it off the gold standard back in the early 70s. They've been riding that wave ever since, just buying what they want, print what they want, do what they want, pay for corruption around the world, all sorts of things. But, you know, it's got to the point now where the fiat currency is done and something else needs to happen. Now, these people won't give up. They're still world dominators. They sit back all quiet and pretend. So what I would do, say for instance, if I was interested in owning the world currency, is I would let this cryptocurrency boom happen. I would start to let people use it as forms of exchange. I would make sure that people got it in their consciousness. It was decentralized and it was anti-banks, because obviously they can't go on playing the same rules. Their time's done. So is anti-banks, is anti-this, is anti-that, and anti-establishment. You buy into the consciousness of the very hardcore people that would normally be completely against something like this, that they seen what it truly was. And once you've won over the hardcore people who are willing, who want to get away from banks and everything else and centralized control, then you've won the game, really. It's just a matter of the rest of the people are sitting waiting for you to do something anyway. It's the hardcore sort of activists that would be against you doing this. So you let that happen, and it can seem totally organic, and it has to be, really. It has to be, to get into the consciousness of those hardcore people. Then what you do then is you come along and you go, right, you know, this is very dangerous, these cryptocurrencies, because people can be paid for, people can pay for assassins, for instance. They can do what they want to do. They can avoid all sorts of things. People are suffering because of this, because the fluctuation of the cryptocurrency is so vast up and down. You buy into it, so you make it seem, you build the hype up like, you know, as a banking system, you could print infinite money, so you just buy into it, and, you know, in a massive way, and then you can obviously sell and almost create like a downfall, a crash. But by buying into it as well, you're giving everybody else the green light to say, oh, this is the new thing because banks are investing into it. So it gets into the consciousness, it builds up really massive, and then it comes crashing down. And at the point of making this video, I think is fallen. Actually, Bitcoin particularly has fallen. Other currencies are rising, and people are playing that world, and fair play to them. But at the same time, what you've got to remember is that people are playing that world, and in that world, and ones who were in Bitcoin who were shouting about it so much all the time, even now, and gloating and, you know, showing off about what they've made and what they've done. They've set themselves up for something real bad now. I've had one guy block me last week because he just couldn't handle the fact that, you know, I had a different point of view, and argue with me to say that Bitcoin's been going up for 7 years and it's never gone down. And I'm like, the classic show of a bubble, you know, it can't go up forever. It's actually worth less in in terms of what it's worth is worth nothing without anything physical. Ultimately, it will come back to its value, which is zero, where it started. Now, the thing is, I think it's very important to point out that I'm not anti-cryptocurrency. I'm just showing that cryptocurrency is here to stay. That's one thing I'm sure of. But I'm just showing where this is going. So now all the people who feel that it's decentralized and everything else, they're all like buying into this, that, and the next, and it's creating all this poverty and things like that. Along come governments, so central government, whether that be the American government, the English government, Russians, Chinese, and Indians as well, and the Indian government, because all these people own, in the background, have been buying up every single bit of gold that they can get, whether that be by stealth or on purpose. The Russians make they don't hide how much they're buying. They've got it all out on show. The Chinese and the Americans are very, very interesting. So in England, it's just seen as being not something that's very important, that it's worthless or whatever. Whilst the bank's still got tons and tons in their vaults. But at the same time, China, for instance, has on-book gold and off-book gold, buying 100 tons a week from one particular mine. And it would buy 200 tons, but they won't allow them to buy it because they have other responsibilities to supply other people like Rolex and many other gold buyers. So these contracts have to be fulfilled. But believe me, if China is buying everything, and it will not let it go. So it's buying every single ounce of gold that it can, and it will not ever let it go. Russia's doing the same. India's doing the same. America is a bit more quiet with it, and there's reasons behind that psychologically for the world. In terms of what China has, for instance, their off-book reserves will take them up to almost. We don't really know exactly what levels China and America's got, but believe me, they're pretty close to being number one. They're number two for sure, and America's number one in their gold reserves. Now, there's reasons why. So now let's get back into the fiat currency, the cryptocurrency, because this is where I'm going with what I'm saying now. So my case for cryptocurrency is that what will happen is the government will come along and they will say, we've got all these forms of exchange, none of them can be trusted, they're all like boom, crash, people are suffering, people are dying. We're going to create our own cryptocurrency. So we've had the lost leaders, people have made millions and everything else. They will be taxed eventually, they will be found, and they will be taxed. Or they'll just lose it all anyway. It's happened before. People, the tax offices go back sort of 6-8 years and they look at everything that's gone on and people who've made money and they charge them capital gains tax, strip all the wealth. And, so if you're trying to do stuff on the quiet, you just can't do it. Eventually it comes to get you. So the best way to be is be open and clever. So what's going to happen now is the major governments around the world will, and it will be mainly China and the US, will come along and they will back their currency. Because remember, the only value that cryptocurrency does not have, that gold actually has, is physical gold. So the cleverest thing for these governments to do is to turn around, and what they've been preparing for is to turn around and go, right, we're going to bring out our own cryptocurrency, and it's going to be backed by gold. So there you've got it, the whole package now, because you've got the gold, you've got the currency, it exists in digital form. Therefore, you decide exactly what happens with it. You can see there's a paperwork trail, whatever happens. The 80% of it doesn't matter how rebellious you are and everything else, 80% of the country that you're in will immediately buy into that country's form of exchange, and it will become the new form of exchange. Now, we can turn around and say, that's okay because I'll just still use my Bitcoin and there's nothing they can do about it. Well, what people are forgetting, and this is something I haven't heard anywhere yet, is that if these big, powerful people, the huge corporations and governments in general and everything else, if they own everything, which they pretty much do, there's small business wise, there's nobody really doing anything. It's all owned by central government and central banking system and governments and everything else. So what they turn around and do is they turn around and say, well, we won't accept certain currencies. We will only say, they could say that promote theirs. They could say, well, we'll only accept, if someone wants to buy oil from us or buy anything, then we will only accept the form of exchange that we recognize and we back. And then you will see the big battle off then between China and America, because each one of those will want to own the world currency. And obviously it will be who the Americans and the Chinese can persuade to come in with them to back their currency with the gold and actually start trading with them. Because remember, that all this comes down to, it doesn't matter what form of trading you have. All this really comes down to is whether or not the other person will accept your form of exchange. It was the same years ago. If you went out into a field and you said, I want a goat, and the boat when I want, or sheep, if you both agreed on it, you exchanged it. If one didn't agree, it didn't happen. But remember that there's people here who got all those resources now, resources that we need to survive, and they decide what form of exchange they get. So, of course, we can turn around and say, well, okay, so that's fine. We back it by gold. How are we going to do that without massive deflation? So, so we want to back a cryptocurrency with gold. How are we going to do that without massive deflation in the market? Well, the best way to do that is to is in the dying days of fiat currency itself, is to turn around and say, whichever country is around the world who decide that they want to do it, they will overnight will decide to revalue the price of gold. Now, this obviously we know gold and silver is manipulated anyway. I want to go into this with other videos, but basically that paper gold futures markets, buying into gold mines, is all comes into the actual physical, as well as the physical gold to manipulate the prices. That's now been abolished. So as of the first of the month, tomorrow actually, as it is, because it is New Year's Eve now in 2017. This, as of tomorrow, there's a new that certain influential people who have been manipulating the price of gold via algorithms have now been told that that's now going to be made illegal. So they've had to back out of contracts, which they're obviously contracted to keep the price of gold algorithmically to a certain level. And without going too far into it, because I want to do it on another video, they do this via bids, and then the bids get cancelled if they go outside these algorithms, and people need to rebid on the gold and silver and things like this. So it's all complicated, and it sounds complicated, but remember, always come back to the point where physical gold is now going to have to be backing a cryptocurrency of a given country. That's how they get control back of that currency. And then on top of that, what they do is they don't want deflation, because deflation caused a massive depression, like in the 30s. People would say we're not in a depression now. I would say we are. I would say that there is fake, worthless money making it seem like we're not in a depression. But in actual fact, people are realizing that you can't do anything without both people working very, very hard, blah, blah, blah. And your money don't go very far. It's getting worse, And it will. The middle class will be destroyed basically by this, eaten up, because they're the ones with things that get taxed, and the rich don't pay tax. And the middle class work for everybody basically. They pay the rich and they pay the poor. Hence the working class hero. But yeah, so what happens is we get this back. So now to avoid deflation, what they do is they revalue the price of gold overnight. So the easiest way to do that, say if you were in America, you would say, we're now buying gold. The estimates are for backing the currency at the current levels is that there is going to be about going to need about 40% backing for fiat currency to currently keep and maintain the levels. So I would say if they do this for cryptocurrency, say for instance, then they're going to need about a 40% gold back in and keep the same sort of levels. You know, they're going to try and they're going to figure out a way with these cryptocurrencies to make them do this and make them centralized. Now, if they revalue exactly pound for pound or dollar for dollar exactly what's going on here, then what's going to happen is gold is going to rocket up. Say it was 40%, for instance. Say they agreed on 40%, gold would rocket up to £10,000 an ounce. Now, I don't want to cover this too much in this video because this is I'm trying to make this into 3 separate parts and do my case for gold in a separate one. But basically, the way they do that then is they just buy. They can pay as much money as they want because if fiat currency is printed by them. They can decide to revalue it overnight and say, we're buying everything, anything anybody got now, we're buying it for that much money. And this is how you do that. This is how you create a cryptocurrency that's backed by gold and guaranteed for a certain amount, and you stop the deflation activities, depression and everything else, and we get back onto some sort of stability, albeit a very uncomfortable few years, because remember, there's people all around the world that want to own this, and there's a lot of energy involved behind it, which we can see. When energy builds, it has to level itself out. That sometimes ends up in war. Sometimes it can end up in just countries just falling. You know, countries just disintegrate, and their threat becomes no more. But certainly the ones with the most gold to back their cryptocurrency will be the ones that will be dominating the next sort of however many years. So yeah, I want to keep this as short as I can. As usual, I've gone way over the top, but yeah, something to think about. So my next one, I think I'm going to do the next one on gold, and then the following one on silver, and they're both really interesting. If you even find something in here that made you think, oh my god, I didn't think of that, then you're going to love my gold and silver videos that are to come. Bye.